with you all and to have questions right the way through, so please don't hold back. We also decided that a little bit of controversy would be no bad thing, so anything that has been really bugging you that you really want to put on the table would be great to have now. So it's just my pleasure to introduce the panel to kick off with, and we've got three wonderful panelists with very different backgrounds, actually. So just let me start here next to me. We have Christiane. Christiane's background was for a long time Global HR Director at AXA, but now is partner at Heidrick Struggles, and so has seen the hiring process, I guess, from both ends of the equation there. Next door we have Kate, who you may have seen on the debate. So we know that you've got very forthright views about the way some of the diversity issues are affected, particularly in your own specialist area at Applied, as CEO of Applied. And so I'm expecting quite a few questions for you, Kate, about how we can apply data analytics and other techniques to improve our practices going forward. Last but very not least, we have Amanda at the end. And Amanda is Global Head of HR for... Global Lead for IND for Accenture. And Amanda told me that she had hired over 100,000 people last year, 45% of which were women. So I think that deserves applause before we even start.
Not personally.
All personally. No, joking. So why don't we kick off? I think, Christiane, you are going to kick us off with some thoughts about are there better approaches, really, to attracting the right talent going forward, the very best talent? And, also, will companies hire teams rather than individuals?
We are sharing. You said that we would share. I'm going to park the team question a bit. That's very controversial, so maybe we come to that later. I'd like to take the first part of your question, which is really what are companies doing and how can they do better? And I'd like to revert that and to look at it from a candidate perspective. So if you apply for a role, there are actually a lot of differences that take place, how the potential is assessed of a man versus a woman. And there's interesting data out there on this. And so in 2012, a lot of VC capital was floating around, and a lot of women and men were trying to get this capital. And they always kind of didn't get as much as male teams or male investors. So Harvard started looking into this, and what they realized is there is a promotion bias versus a prevention bias. So when a VC capitalist interviews a man, he is intuitively promoting him and asking questions like, how high are your sales going to be? What kind of marketing campaign are you thinking? So how are you going to be successful? Whereas when a team of women came, it was more about how are you covering your losses? What's your risk management like? And it gets even worse. Not only is there a promotion and a prevention bias, women were then answering, of course, in a more preventive manner. And that led to even less confidence in investing. And the same takes place when you are interviewed for a top position. It's ultimately also a sales job. So the research that was following this year it came out was really advising, if you realize as a candidate that you are getting questions that are more preventive, more looking at what could go wrong, why you could maybe not be ready for the job, make an effort to answer in a self-promoting way, so this promoting style. So don't fall into this back and forth of preventing. And I find that really, really interesting, because if you pair that with the fact that we are assessing the potential of men and women very differently, looking at previous performance, there's a lot we can do here. So there's bias on the hiring side, but there's also a lot you can all do when you're interviewing for these positions.
Thanks, and I guess a follow-on from that then, maybe we'll ask Kate, is if that's taking place, is there a way to educate or to prevent that preventive style in the first place? Can we change not just the candidate side, but can we change the organizational side?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how many of you were in the session earlier where there was a really interesting debate about whether or not what organisations can and cannot do in this space. And I guess on the applied side, we use behavioural and data science to try and remove bias from the hiring process. And we spent about 8 to 9 months on what would we build into a platform, a technology platform that people would use in their everyday lives that we thought built the best evidence on how to remove bias from selection decisions. So we do name-blind recruitment, but we also do a host of other things to change who sees what and when, so that when you score candidates, you can trust your judgments. But we kind of paused before we launched the platform at that point, because we realized that if all we were doing was pumping the same information into a hiring platform, which is largely what sits on CVs or self-reports by candidates about what they're amazing at, we were really only going half the way there, right? And a really great question earlier in one of the sessions was, well, if a man is better at self-promotion than a woman is, and you name blind, you might select the man more often because he seems more confident and presents himself better. So we went back into the evidence and had a long, hard look at of the myriad things that organisations get candidates to do when they apply for jobs. I mean, it's incredible the kinds of different things that organisations make candidates do. What of them are actually predictive of performance? Like, which of these thousands of things actually help you to understand who's going to be great at the job and who's going to stay there and thrive? And I'd be the first person to say that I think the evidence in this space is very nascent, and we need a lot more evidence out there to help us make these decisions. But the meta-analyses consistently come up that the more that you can test candidates on the kinds of things they do in the day job, prospectively, not what have you done in the past, and not what school did you go to 15 years ago, which we all know is how most people make these decisions, the more likely it is you'll find someone who's going to be great at it. And that's wildly intuitive and yet surprisingly uncommon, right? How often are you given, here are 5 challenges that you're likely to face in the first week of this job, tell us what you're going to do about them. And the beauty of testing candidates that way, which is what we have embedded in the platform now, is sort of work sample-based assessments, is that they have this dual, well, in fact, they have 3 benefits. The first benefit is that they're more predictive of performance, so great. For those people who care about finding people who are going to be great for the job, you're going to be doing a better job of it that way. The second benefit is that because it's, here's a challenge, what would you do? It's a more inclusive way of uncovering whether someone has the skill set you're looking for. You don't care whether or not they learnt their project management skills at Accenture or at another organisation. You just know that they know how to do that part of the job. And it's because it's task-based, it's less about, I'm amazing. It's more like, here, let me tell you how I would handle this particular scenario, which is less likely to fall prey to the kind of gender differences in self-promotion that we talked about. And the third benefit, and I think it comes back to what you're talking about, Christiane, is think about the candidates. We so often think about hiring processes as a way for the organisation to look at a bunch of people in front of them and make a selection about who they want. And we so often forget that in this day and age where people are moving around much more than they used to, that's the window of your organisation to the world. What do those candidates feel about the experience of being hired by your organisation? And using work sample-based assessments is a much better way of giving a candidate a sense of what that job's going to look like and whether they want it, than the kind of asymmetric, send me in every piece of biographic information about you and I'll make a decision whether I like you. So that's one way we've thought about it.
Do you use some of those techniques at Accenture? Would you throw the CV out the window? And
I would throw the CV out the window. So as Julia said, we managed to move from 35% hiring women to 45% in just a few years. And we did that through using some of the techniques. So I love the fact that we've got so many entrepreneurial, often women, coming up with these great experiments that we can use, because it's really helped us. So one of the things that we did at the beginning was really look at what was going wrong. I mean, we all know that 60% of graduates, 60% of graduates are women. So it's not about a shortage of talent. It's about where to find the talent and making sure that you're the best organisation that talent wants to come to. And we operate in 120 countries, and we analysed what was happening from CV through to people onboarding. Where were we losing women in the pipeline and ethnic minorities? And what we saw was it was actually a sourcing issue. It wasn't an issue that we had bias necessarily in the process. It was that not enough women were applying to us. So we used a gamification, a Pymetrics tool, which going out to universities where women tend to be more predominant or minorities more predominant, looking for curiosity, creativity, resilience through games, and really seeing that we could get women to apply to us who were maybe afraid that we were just looking at the CV. Another thing is digital interviewing. So another very creative startup, HireView, who allow people to tell their stories. You know, behind every CV on a page is a human story, and HireView actually allows people to tell that story in a way where you can capture, perhaps if somebody has got a story that's not about going to the top college, getting the best grades, but actually shows real resilience and grit, you can really get to that story. But part of our issue on the sourcing was that we had been too focused on having maybe 20 capabilities, and we know, as you've just
all in one person.
Yeah. So we had, job descriptions that were too masculine. So we've been using Textio to analyze how masculine the job descriptions are that we're posting out there, but also dramatically reducing the number of capabilities, because we know that men will apply if they've got about 60% of the capabilities, but women are put off and may only apply if they think they've got 100%. So looking at some of these tools has really helped us. But I think you have to really turn the mirror on yourself and say, am I a company that women or minorities actually want to join and can be successful here? So that's been part of the work.
That's actually something I was going to ask about. I mean, I don't know whether, in the audience as well, you find that, but I mean, we're certainly finding that we have to compete much more as a company than we ever used to in terms of attracting people in the first place and actually going out to places to try to make people aware of us. I don't know, is that something that is a general experience? So it's a much more competitive environment to, even before you're actually trying to get to a wider group. Are there any questions? Anybody, anything wanted to come in at this point? Please.
I'm interested for Christiane. Headhunters tend to get involved when it's very senior or it's very difficult or it's very global, and they're often seen as part of the problem. Obviously, the companies like Accenture hiring, I forget what that, huge number of thousands, they're not using a headhunter for that. I'm interested in your perspective on, do you think the headhunting community has gotten with the program?
Has gotten with the program? With the program of bringing more women in? Is that the question? More broadly. Well, it's the only way for them to make money going forward, because even from an HR director perspective, but now in the position as a headhunter, there's not a single client who wouldn't be asking for either a female slate, or more recently, that's a bit lame, everybody's doing that, but that the final interview process has to include men, women, or other diversity. And some search firms are not being asked to do any work because they are not diverse enough in the team that they present to the client, right? Because how credible are you if you're saying, hey, we're really into gender diversity, and 3 white men in suits show up for the pitch? So they are really changing it, and we are certainly changing, and I guess that's why I was hired, to be honest. So because really, it's to bring this to the front and to really live it and be a bit more provocative and not just say we have a female slate. That's just not good enough anymore.
Yeah. I'd like to add to that. I mean, I think, so we do use headhunters at the top end, but we have started to use them differently, because where historically we might have had our job description that we were going out and looking for candidates who match that, now we're more interested in building a pipeline of really great talent and taking time to meet with them and understand what they're looking for, and actually even shape roles for them. So we have done that at the higher end, and I think that's essential. And we're seeing that women approach their careers quite differently than men, and are less interested perhaps in the specifics of the role and more interested in the relationships and the network, and are they going to be supported to be successful?
We were having a discussion too. I know, Christiane, you want to come back in, and Kate, perhaps. We were having a discussion, to your point about relationships, about how, you know, it can take some time for a woman to choose to shift, particularly if it's a major shift to a, you know, a significant step up, for example. And therefore, the relationship building isn't just important to the organization, but very important to actually attract the candidates. Do you want to come back in, Christiane?
Yes.
And then Kate, perhaps?
I can't resist, because that's exactly what I'm seeing. So I'm not seeing the typical, oh, we've got an open position, reactive, let's find the right person, ideally a woman. It is really saying, can you map the market? Can you show us the top female talent or the top women in this and this and this market, in this function? And then to engage in a relationship. Women take up to 2 years to decide before they want to move or not at the very senior level, and they want to know what they're getting into, because they are exposed, they cannot afford a risk. Cultures of organizations are very unique. If it goes wrong, it's not good for the candidate and certainly not good for the organization. So building that is really the work we are doing now as search firms. So identify, make sure there are meetings happening, interviews, and this is now a long strategic game as opposed to firefighting.
And I'd just like to add to that, I think, coming back to the candidate experience of things, can I just get a show of hands for the last time that you applied for a job? Did you get feedback on how you went if you didn't get the job? Right? Terrible, right? Most of us, so we heard earlier today in one of the sessions that a woman went through 12 rounds of interviews or something and then got dropped at the end. And usually you get an email that says, "Dear, insert name here." Sometimes they get that wrong. You know, sorry, great field, can't tell you anything more. Love to hear from you in the future. Goodbye. And we thought that was really ridiculous, because actually through that process, the organization's learned a ton about whether you're a good fit for that role. Yep. They've decided that you're not, but they probably learn a lot about your strengths and weaknesses for that role. Why don't they share it? And so we built a personalized but automated feedback tool. So everyone who applies for a job through Applied gets to get a link where they can click on and see where their skills mapped on and where they were stronger and weaker. And they don't get the full suite. They don't know that it was Christiane that ultimately made the call that you didn't get the job, because that can cause issues. But they do get to see something about why they weren't taken through. And we recently analysed data from candidates on that very page, over 1,000 candidates. The median score we were getting on that page was 9 out of 10. Because even though you've just been rejected for a job, you're actually learning something. And the comments you get from people are like, "I'm really disappointed, but at least I understand why." Or, "This is really rare." You know, you occasionally get people being like, "What do you mean I'm not amazing at collaboration? I'm amazing at collaboration." Or whatever it might be. But most of the time, people are just looking for an interactive experience. Because, again, coming back to... And I guess what I think is relevant here is there's also some really interesting evidence coming out at the moment that women and men respond to feedback quite differently. And we know that that's been a kind of an evidence base that's growing in the context of promotion and kind of internal experiences. But no one really understands what happens if someone applies to Accenture and then doesn't get the job, and it's a woman. Does she see that as a sign that she's not good for Accenture and never comes back? Or is there a way of saying, actually, you were a close fit, or it just wasn't quite right now, or there's another role over here that might be better fit for you? And there is some evidence that suggests that we might inadvertently deter some of our female talent by not understanding how to give feedback. So we're starting to experiment with what does work well for some people in that very moment when you kind of leave an interaction with them when they've applied for a job.
Did you want to come in, Amanda? No?
I think it's a very good point, and I don't think we do a good enough job of it. For sure, as a large organisation, it's very hard to keep the talent warm, and I think it's a very good point. It's something we all need to do better.
It also seems to me as and then I know we've got a question over here. It also seems to me as somebody who's not a specialist in the area that what you're saying is giving the impression that actually we have to almost treat people as we would want to treat someone if they were already working for us before they're actually working for us. So we have to give feedback. We have to, shape things to fit them. We have to think about, a much broader range of things and in terms of our own behavior and almost treat them like an employee from a much, much earlier period, so that they can sort of see, in a way, too, what it would be like working for the organization, because presumably that should be a reflection of how you would work together later.
Yeah, we've done a lot of research on the whole candidate piece, which keeps coming up here.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about a car manufacturer, they've really shifted the way they sell cars, recognizing that women are influencing the majority of the decisions. So they've stopped advertising constantly about how quickly you get to 60 miles or 60 kilometers an hour and talking more about safety, for example. And when you're thinking about the client, the candidate, you've got to think about why would they come to Accenture? Why would they see us as a place where they can thrive as a woman or a minority, somebody with disabilities, for example? And I think that's it's a very important part of it. You know, we've been doing some work on Truly Human. Yesterday I was part of listening to a debate about 100% human. We all need to be much better in the workplace and making sure we've got an organisation people want to come to.
Absolutely. Let's take the next question. Here first, waiting.
It's probably not a bad segue. I guess my question is around emotional intelligence. And I am interested to know how, at the top, you recruit around this subject. So how do you find emotional intelligence? Is it through LinkedIn? I don't know. And how do you value it? I guess, is that changing? And that applies for men and women, I think, obviously.
Why don't we take a couple of questions, hear the questions, and then we'll...
Lady in the red as well.
So the question has to do with flexible work arrangement, because I think there's a lot of expectation of women that they may have additional stress from having children. So lots of employers with new technology have the ability of people work from home. Do you see that expanding, or do you see it shifting? Because there's a lot of debate, at least in many of US companies that I see around that topic.
I just wanted to go back for a moment to the conversation around the CV and higher view particularly. And I wanted to sort of understand how you begin the process with a candidate without a CV. You know, how do you initially connect with them? And is it just that and how do you use higher view to have that? Do you use that to scan CVs or scan people, have conversation? I don't really understand how that works and how you can take that out, the CV out of the process, which I'd love to do.
I'll come back to you next round, okay? First one, next round. Okay, so we've got 3 questions there, quite different ones, really. Emotional intelligence, sort of flexibility, and how do you begin the process without the CV? Who wants to kick off?
I can probably best talk about emotional. So I take the EQ question, which I think is a great one. So not via LinkedIn, clearly. That wouldn't be possible, or I have not seen the machine or the analytics that can do it. It is a very subjective thing to assess, and as the hiring process, and I think it's great, is very human, and humans are involved, it's also a subjective assessment to say, is there the right level of EQ and IQ? I would answer the following. The future leader cannot afford to be a person without the same level of EQ and IQ. So we are coming out of a time where the IQ was absolutely enough. Going forward, we see more and more that are heavy on the emotional and not the, so it's kind of overrated, and we're catching up and appreciating and in seeing it. So it definitely is a key skill, and it's something you see it and you know it when you see it, but it's not something you can test by a machine. So it's required, and on the back of that there is a new term that I like, it's the servant leader. Yeah, so that you really, as a leader, you serve the organization, you serve your direct reports. You have to have the ability to understand what they need, and not about me, but it's about the servant leader. They are really making it. Is that answering? Yeah.
Thanks. Someone want to come in, or on flexibility?
Or flexibility, yeah.
Please, Amanda.
So one of the things we recently did was launch this campaign called Inclusion Starts With I, which is about bringing everybody into the discussion about diversity and inclusion. So no longer just about women and minorities, people with disabilities, but everybody. And we had a lot of men engage on the topic, talking about the fact that sometimes they feel that their promotion is less celebrated than a woman's because we're very focused on the numbers there, and that 7 out of 10 men actually want to work more flexibly. So I'm hugely optimistic about this space because as I see the millennial generation coming in, I believe that fathers will want to be as engaged as mothers in the workplace. And the truth is, in most cities around the world, both parents need to work today. So I think we'll see more equality at home, and I really believe equality in the workplace needs to start with equality at home, and I think we'll see more flexibility for both men and women. So I think full steam ahead, and we should all be demanding and courageous and innovative in this area. So it's the way forward.
Some nods here. Yes? So optimism. That's great.
I think it'll come from men as much as women, and I think that's where we'll see the real change. Yeah.
Kate, do you want to take the other one?
I feel a bit guilty taking a question on behalf of HireView, and I think maybe let me answer it this way, because we also jettison the CV, and I think HireView does some of the same things. You just sort of think about what are sort of 5 things you're going to face in this week, in your first week, and what would you do in these scenarios, and you give people a short opportunity to respond. We use text-based responses, they use video-based responses, and from there you have the opportunity to kind of elicit a lot more rich information about candidates than you otherwise would.
If you don't have a CV, how do you actually start the process?
So you as an organization ask those questions of candidates and they respond. So, in our case, it's that you're posting it the same way that you would post any other job advertisement out to the world. It's just that rather than asking for a CV, you ask for answers to these questions. Yeah. And I think that's the same as how you would use HireView. And I guess it does tie in a little bit, and I'm sure HireView has this same approach to the question about EQ. So some of the questions that are working really well, and we do a lot of analytics on the questions within our platform, that work really well are things like, here is an email that you have received from a client. Let's say you work for Accenture and something's gone wrong on a project. Write the email you would send back to the client explaining what's just happened. And so quite practically, someone is saying, dear client, blah, 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 and that is what they're being assessed on. And the beauty of those types of assessments is you can pick up lots of different things, like what kind of information did they use, but actually more importantly, how did they structure that email? What kind of language did they use? And that's where the EQ kind of assessment, I'm not saying it's perfect, I think Christiane, you're absolutely right, it's still real black magic in assessing this stuff, but I think we're starting to get a better idea of how might you systematically attempt to measure these things that don't just rely on the first 15 seconds of meeting someone, which is typically how we've done that in the past.
Okay, let's come up here, because I promised.
I have a question. Just what is for you the profile of a talent? You have a profile in general, you have a profile from a definition from your company. So how do you define a talent? And I come back for the sourcing, because you said that when you analyze, the gaps and the issue, it was the sourcing. So you said like you are going to the universities and it's more at the beginning, and the same. How do you track the talent? And so it comes from the beginning. What is the profile of a talent?
Are you asking how you create the profile for each particular position, at different levels? And so how does that get created? And then how do you measure against that? And how do you then find and source the people? Who wants to start?
I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, so let me try, and then you can tell me whether I'm hitting the right mark. So we hire for many different types of roles, because actually we were 11 different businesses. So you need the capabilities, but I think what we're looking for more and more is people who have a very high learning agility, people who are very flexible, agile, have that grit, that resilience. And so what we are pushing ourselves, we're pushing our managers and leaders to do more is to worry less about the the academic qualification, but to look for these personal qualities and to look for people who will learn quickly and can communicate, with our clients, our customers, be collaborative in a team, and be resilient. I mean, it's the consulting business is can be tough, right? You're in front of a client all the time, Julia can say, and you've got to take risks, and you might fall, but you've got to pick yourself back up, and you've got to be able to keep going, and that's why that's much more important than a CV. You could see somebody with the highest grades, but maybe everything's always gone well for them. Whereas when you get behind and you get into the human stories, somebody who's actually not achieved the same grades, but has actually demonstrated resilience and an ability to fight through a very difficult circumstance, you see some real personal strength. So it's more complex than skills, it's personal attributes.
Now, we're coming up to the end of time. So we've got 2 questions, one over in the corner and one here. So we'll take those questions very quickly. Have some, thank you, very quick responses, I guess, from each of our panelists. And maybe, guys, as you respond, you could also give your kind of final thought that or take out from this area as you've been thinking about it. That would be great. So first question here and then down here.
Thank you for taking the question. So I have a question more around assessing culture and values. So people's cultural fit and values to an organization, which in part I think you can take out from the face-to-face interviews, from the interpersonal interactions. But looking at a more constructive way of doing that in terms of really assessing cultural fit and whether the person's values really do mirror the values of the organization. Can you offer any insights into how you'd go about that from your own experience?
Okay, I just wanted to come back to another side of that question. Do you have talent management program? I guess yes. But what would make, once people are inside the organization, what would make you at a certain moment point out someone and say, this is a talent, this could be one of our future executive, and then how would you pick up some people out of a group of persons, and once you've done it, what would you do to develop those people and, well, make them grow?
Thank you. 2 very broad questions, and I'm thinking we're going to have to squeeze this into 20 seconds each or something. So I'm sure we're around later if you want to pick up if we don't actually get to the full answers. But Christian, why don't you start?
I would like to start with the second question. So how to pick the person out of the talent pool? I would really echo what Amanda has been saying. We would always look for learning, agility, resilience. So that would not be so much different. But I think the difference is what happens then when you have identified the person. And there are various ways. One is obviously to train on technical skills, etc. Here are the things that I've seen work in larger organizations. One is in order to learn technical skills, this is not theoretical, it happens on the job. So what you want to find is somebody that you can shadow, that you can see in action, and then take like a copy-paste and make that your style. So any kind of tandem, and to match these tandems to work together is one route to success. The second that I've seen, and I'm rushing here, I'm seeing your looks, I'm seeing your looks, is not to start mentoring these. I think women and men are completely over-mentored and under-sponsored. So what I would find a person that sponsors these talents, and the difference is to talk about a person and not with a person in the moment when it comes to promotion. So these are the 2 things. On the job, teaming up with somebody who really trains you, and second, to be sponsored. So somebody is there in the moment of truth when the promotion is being discussed.
Very good advice. Thank you. Kate?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
I'll take the second one because I don't think I have much to add. The first one because I don't think I have much to add to Christiane, what she said there. I worry a lot about culture fit, if I'm honest. As a behavioural scientist, I worry that that's an opportunity to say you look and feel a little bit like what we look and feel like as an organization, and I want to kind of replicate that. So I'm going to steal some advice that someone I know, Marley Diawis, who runs Code First Girls, which is an amazing organization in London. She says, don't look for culture fit, look for mission fit. And I actually think sounds the same, but it's not at all. And when you really, really get underneath it, you have an opportunity to understand that's truly what you care about, right? That they're there because they share the values of the organization. They don't share the look and feel of the organization as it stands right now. So that's how I would approach it.
Shall we start summing up? Yeah. So I just want to say, I'm hugely, hugely optimistic about the future. I think that the millennial and Z generation are really pushing and challenging organizations to do better. I think diverse teams, the business case behind diverse teams has been won. If you don't feel that, contact me and I will help you beat that that goal. But I feel in my own organization that the business case has been won. People understand that greater diversity and equality for men, women, minorities, etc., is the way forward to be more innovative, to be more successful as an organization. So it's not about a lack of talent. It's about making sure that we get to all the talent out there in the market, and it's good that organizations are being challenged to fight for that talent.
Kate, a few summary words?
I'd say there is so much more data out there than we yet have any idea what we want to do with, but I think the more people that spend time thinking about the information and the insights we can get from that, the more we'll learn what does and doesn't work, and we should be more open-minded to the answers to those questions.
Well, since we are the Women's Forum, it's never been a better time for women to be in the market. So the demand is there. Lean in. Don't take a rejection personally. Yeah, it doesn't mean that AXA or Accenture doesn't like you. Yeah, come back, lean in, apply again. The demand is there, but you got to expose yourself. Absolutely.
So. And I think applause for all the panel. I don't think I have too much to add. I'm sure it's been a lot of food for thought for all of us, actually, me included. I've been sitting there listening, taking tips and learning both on how I can apply for things and how I should try to encourage talent to come to our organization as well. So thank you all very much. It was great.